Alright everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. So, this being Florida, the weather is fixing to shift once again. It's looking like it might freeze here in a couple of days. So I wanted to get this video done and get it out to y'all just to show those of you who are new at this, or even those who have been around a while, some ideas on how to take care of your crops, your different plants when it freezes. Alright, particularly when it gets a late freeze. We're like a couple of days from Easter, and it's looking like it's going to freeze here, which is highly unusual for this area. Alright, so this is a very late freeze. So all the stuff that I've got planted, like if you look down here, you can see what I got here is some baby papayas. Just little bitty things. I haven't even thinned it out yet because I want to wait until some of them get their second leaves. But I'd like to be able to grow a papaya tree. So, I need to cover this if it actually does freeze. A couple of options you got. One, you can use a pot. Now the only thing I would tell you is if you have a pot like this, because it's got holes in it, it can let the heat out and might get air blowing into it. But if for a light freeze, this should be fine all by itself. And you just place it over your plants at night, take it off in the morning. All right, you don't want to leave it on there because then your plants aren't going to get sun and it will kill them eventually. All right, so that's one good example of how to cover your plants. Another way, you can do it nature's way, which is just to cover them up with leaves. All right, so what happens when it's cold out is this ground, that if you dig down, it's probably about 60 degrees or so up underneath the wood chips. So particularly in areas where you don't have a lot of wood chips or a lot of mulch, what will happen is that ground will radiate the heat back into the cold and will keep it a more normal temperature. Alright, so I'm going to cover these real quick before I forget and they die. So basically what you need to do is you need to keep that air or that radiant heat in place so that basically it'll keep that plant from freezing. And what happens with a plant when it gets really cold is basically as the ice crystals form and expand inside of the cells of the plant, it basically bursts the cell walls and kills the plant. Now a lot of things will survive a freeze. Like this is an apple tree, and apple trees they will go all the way down to freezing and well below before they get hurt. Now the apples themselves that have already started fruiting, we'll see how that goes. It could end up killing the apples and I may not get a harvest this year. That's one of the disadvantages of a late freeze, is if you got fruit that's already on the tree, it can kill the fruit. It shouldn't kill the tree, but it will kill the fruit. Peaches is another thing that should be fine. But if you look over here, I'll give you a link in the, well, I'll put a link up here that shows my fig trees, when it froze last time, basically all of the leaves fell off. I mean, just completely killed all the leaves. But of course the tree stayed fine. Now these smaller ones like this one, and I got another one back there that I just planted, hopefully they'll be okay. I'm sure that the stem will stay fine. Even if it kills the leaves, they should hopefully leaf back out. Alright, now let me go over here and we'll talk about some other things. So, some of the things that will do fine in a freeze, like radishes will take a light freeze, carrots will take a light freeze. I mean, garlic, you can basically plant it and let it go all winter. I mean, a lot of this garlic and onions was planted well before any of the freezes, and we got quite a few freezes this year. Tomatoes will not deal with a freeze well at all. Alright, things like kohlrabi, which is a type of cabbage, should be fine with a freeze. Beets should be fine with a freeze. Collard greens will be fine with a freeze. Lettuces, broccoli, not sure about dill. Cabbages, any type of onion or garlic type of thing should be fine. My kiwi plant over here, I mean, I don't know. If it gets frozen, it'll probably knock this back to where I got to wait for more growth. That's just part of the deal. And I really, if you look over here, man, my fig trees are really looking nice. So I'm really hoping that it doesn't freeze and I lose all those leaves. But hey, we take what we get, right? So One of the issues you have is how are you going to deal with a tall plant? Now, one of the things in that video I was talking about was my tomato plants, which I still had growing at the time of the first freeze. Essentially, anywhere it touched, because I covered it up with, what did I cover it with? I want to say it was sheets. But anywhere the sheet was actually touching the plant, it froze. The inner leaves stayed fine. So basically, you're going to need to cover with something that doesn't touch the plant, so you keep that coldness away from the plant. All right, so you can do it a couple of ways. Like you can take this row here. Let me grab a sheet real quick. All right, so now for a light freeze, a sheet should be fine. You can use an old blanket. I like to use old sheets, and you can also buy, somebody had talked about you can buy Dollar Tree sheets for like $1, which is really cool. But what I would do is take and anchor one of your corners, like so that you can drape it over. And then all you got to do is take and drag your sheet over the top of your tomato cages. Now, if I was actually going to do this, I would take and push these tomato cages down further so that I had this sheet draping on the ground. I just push them down like so, and then I would go ahead and prop these out like so, and then put another one over here just to hold everything in place, and then maybe one here to keep it from blowing under. Alright, and that will just keep that radiant heat from the ground in. Now, if you don't have tomato cages, by the way, the wind does make this more challenging. If you don't have tomato cages, you can rig up something from branches. So what you can do, again, you take just branches, find a V, like these are some old crepe myrtle branches that I had chopped off and still hadn't ground down. Just get you a little notch like that. Take that, push it into the ground. Let's move down here a little further. And keep in mind, you just got to keep it off the plant, so you can go down pretty deep if your plot will allow you to do so. This is my hugelkultur bed, so it's got wood up underneath there. And then take a longer stick, just drape it across the top, and then once again, now you can tie this off if you want to, but you're just trying to cover it for the cold. So then once again, just drape a sheet across it. You might have to put a clothespin in the middle and make it 2 sheets like on a long row like this. Bottom line is you got to keep Alright, the bottom line is you have to keep some dead air in place that will stay somewhat warm so that you don't have that frost getting on the plants and that cold air freezing them. You can use plastic. You can also go out and buy products that are frost blankets that are designed just for this purpose. I mean, well, first off, I don't really want to spend extra money on this. This is something I would rather do for free, just like everything else around here. I'm all into the free thing. So, you know, if you want to do it that way, you can. I mean, it's all dependent upon you. You just got to keep some dead air space. Now, another option, say for example, if you had one small plant that you wanted to cover, like let's say I wanted to cover up this cantaloupe, all right, you could also use a pot like this. Now, the key here is, once again, you don't want the plant touching the pot, so it needs to be big enough to cover the whole plant, and then you can just put some rocks on top, all right, to hold it in place. Now, the only thing with this is it's got a lot of holes, so with something like that, you might want to throw a pillowcase. So you can just take an old pillowcase like this and then cover up the pot, and the pot will keep it off the plant, and the pillowcase will keep it warm. And again, you know, maybe a heavy rock or something like that on top of it, even an old tool, basically anything heavy enough to keep this from blowing away in the wind. All right, so those are all some strategies on how you can cover up your plants. The forecast right now is calling for 39 degrees tonight and then 36 degrees tomorrow. Now 36 is pushing it, but if it stays at that 36 temperature, I won't cover. I will show you this though. Let me show you one more thing here. Now one of the things I will do, I have like some pepper starts here, some tomato starts going here. Those I will take either inside or I'll put them on my back patio where it'll stay warm and keep it above that 32 degrees temperature, just to make sure that they don't get damaged. That's easy to do, whereas covering can be a pain. So I will probably do that with these. Well, I know I will do that with these. I'm hoping I don't have to actually cover everything in the garden, because that's kind of a pain, especially as big a garden as I've got. Now there are some other options. You can do a hoop house. Basically, if you look it up, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's tunnels that you can make that are fairly small and short, but you kind of have to have those either pre-prepared or you got to go out real quick and hope that nobody has bought all the stuff to make them with. Basically, it's just PVC attached to the wood, brought up, arched over, and back down to the other side of the wood, and then a plastic cover over the top of it. And it would come in handy, and I may do that later on this year, for a shade cloth or for a bug cloth to keep the bugs out. But you know, that's kind of up to you whether or not you want to spend that kind of money and pre-plant on a raised bed. If you have a in-ground garden, you can also do it with PVC and then some type of metal in the ground, like either rebar or welding rod or even threaded rod. You can stick it in the ground and then just put your PVC down over the top of that. A lot of different options on how to cover. It just kind of depends on you, on what is best for you and what you're willing to spend the money on. Me, I'm not willing to spend the money on much of anything, so I try and go as cheap as possible. Alright, so that's what I've got. Again, keep an eye on the forecast. I think at 36 degrees we should be fine, and I won't cover anything. If it goes below that, if the forecast starts calling for lower than that, or if you're in an area that's further inland from where I'm at, I'm here on the north side of Jacksonville, right next to 95, so we're kind of like that median temperature. When they forecast for Jacksonville, the city, it usually is about the same as here, all up and down 95 in this area. So, you know, you may, if you're further inland, like out in the Cecil Field area and so on, or White House and such, you might want to go ahead and cover up because it usually gets a little bit colder further inland. Same way it gets a little hotter further inland in the summertime. Alright, so that's what I've got. Give it some thought, pay attention to the weather, and if it gets to freezing, you know, don't lose all your crops to a late freeze. Cover them up. Thanks once again for stopping by. Do me a favor, give me a like, subscribe, and tell your friends, and grow something.